All right. Hello, and how's it going? This is Tyler Evangelista. Um, all right, so what are we doing here? Well, what this is it's going to be a series of quick, short little classes here. Um, kind of explain myself a little bit as to why I'm doing this right here and exactly what we have going on. Now, this is going to be a series of classes focusing specifically on ZBrush. So why am I doing these classes specifically on ZBrush, sort of outside of everything that we've been doing, in our normal day-to-day classes here? Well, we just recently, as a school, were able to pick up ZBrush, and ZBrush is a great, great piece of software for digital sculpting, and really so much more beyond that. Now, up to this point, for those who have taken our digital sculpting classes, we focus primarily on Mudbox, and while Mudbox is a great piece of software, and I can't really say enough about it. Uh, in my opinion, it's not quite up to the point of ZBrush. ZBrush is really kind of the industry standard. Now, I won't say that 100%. There's definitely artists out there that prefer to use Mudbox over ZBrush. I will admit that I like to paint inside of Mudbox far better than ZBrush. I don't really enjoy their set of set of tools that they have available for us there. So since we have all these students that have already gone through the course, or maybe they're gonna have digital sculpting coming up soon here. Still, even with that idea, we're still going to be teaching Mudbox, and we're going to be adding ZBrush to this. And because of that, um, I want to give everyone the chance to get to explore this software. For those who are still taking other classes, but went through that digital sculpting, they're not going to really know how to use ZBrush. Often we did talk a little bit on ZBrush. I know personally from my own classes, I spent about 2 or 3 days giving you a little bit of an introduction, but we don't have the software here for you guys to use, so therefore it's kind of a little bit useless. So I decided that I'm going to start to put out some of these classes here. Now, the idea is that they're going to be quick classes. We're looking at anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes, little snippets of information. So the format that we're going to be looking at here is it's going to be these quick classes focusing on something specific. So this first class we have right here is really just an introduction to the course in general. We'll take a look at the interface of ZBrush and kind of leave it at that. And then we'll kind of move on from there and start to delve deeper and deeper into the software until we start to get more intermediate, and then moving into some of the advanced techniques and things that are really within this program that we love to call ZBrush here. All right. So the purpose of making them these short classes, as a sort of opposed to what we normally do, anywhere from an hour and a half to 3 hours for a lecture, is that for many of you, this is a lot of information. Pretty much every day, especially when you're learning something new, just to get all of that information out of nowhere. And instead of having a 3-hour class, maybe you're, in ZBrush, and all of a sudden you forget some of the BPR render techniques that I talked about previously. Okay, and you need to go back and just get a couple minutes of a refresher. Well, instead of having to sift through 3 hours of videos, or an entire 2.5-hour lecture, you can just jump to that little quick 10 to 20 minute video, get the information you need, and go on and keep creating your art. So that's going to be the idea with these. Now, the topics we're going to really talk about covering here, we're going to go everywhere from the introduction here, the interface, brushes, sculpting techniques, and later on I have goals of actually creating sort of these subclasses on things like human anatomy, things like creature design. There's really the list is kind of endless, just because of how large and powerful ZBrush is. All right, so I've recently in the last couple of years fallen in love with ZBrush, and I just kind of want to share that with everyone here. Now you also notice that this is not going to be one of those .arf files. I am not using WebEx to record this. Hopefully our sound quality is going to be all right. But the idea is that everyone's not going to need to have that WebEx player on their home computer or whatever they're looking at this. This will be able to open as a Windows movie file, which is going to make it nice and easy and portable. And we've even discussed creating a YouTube channel that's locked primarily just for our students here so that they can always come back to these and have an easy access to it here. So with that, I think that's enough of sort of an introduction. Just so you know, this is our first look at all this. So, things may change in the future, but that's sort of the idea I have about this. Now, this is something that I'm doing on my own personal time. So, they may come out slowly. You may get a chunk over the weekend. I'm going to be doing these pretty much on Fridays when I'm not busy grading. And if I have little bits of time on the weekends, and I am quite busy most of the time, so we'll see how this goes. So let's go ahead and just jump right into this here, and we'll jump into ZBrush. Now, one thing I want to let you know here is that I am in fact using a little bit of an outdated version at this point. Now, I've got the newest version of ZBrush on my home computer. On all the computers that you guys are going to be accessing from our classes, or from our campuses here, it's going to have the newest version being 4R4. You can see I've got 4R2B. They actually use kind of weird numbers and annotations when putting out their new versions here, but I'm using 4R2B. Now there's just a couple differences in here. In terms of our interface and everything that we're looking at right now, nothing should really be that different. Okay, so we'll be fine. Later on, you will see that I'm going to be using 4R4. This just happens to be a portable version that I have on an external hard drive. That's going to make it a little bit easier, and I just wanted to get these started. Okay, so I've got ZBrush open, and this is what we're going to see by default when we open up ZBrush. Now, ZBrush is very, very customizable. Okay, I'm going to have an entire lesson, about 20 minutes, just on how we can set this up so that everything is right at your fingertips. So let's look at this interface. So kind of moving around here, the first thing that I want to point out here is going to be what's known as our light box. Now the light box is going to pop open here by default. We have a couple ways that we can look at it. Okay, we can start to view more and more of this as we go. The light box will probably spend, I may even designate an entire class just to this light box. It's a helpful way of accessing files and folders. But for right now, I think I'm just going to get it closed. Okay, it's nothing we need to delve into too much. All right, so we're going to come right over here. As I said, it opens by default. I can go ahead and just hide it here. If we ever need to get back to it, I've got this light box button right here, and it's going to take me back into there while I have access to some of the hidden features inside of ZBrush, like some of the brushes that aren't going to be there right off the bat. So let's go ahead and hide that. Okay, now looking around here, in this center area, I've got my my canvas. Okay, the actual canvas right here, the drawing area being this gradient that we're seeing. This is my main work area. Okay, we have a canvas background as well, being this lighter gray box around here. And this is going to become important as soon as we start talking about camera navigation and sculpting. Okay, but canvas work area, canvas background. All right, now we've got a series of what's known as trays. Okay, so if we look all the way to the left-hand side here, we should see a couple little arrows kind of pointing back and forth there. And if I click on this, it's going to open up what's known as my left tray. Okay, and within my left tray, I may or may not have some what's actually known as a palette available over here. Now we can collapse and expand these just by clicking right here. Now I got one on both sides. The one on the left-hand side, by default, is going to be collapsed, and at least in my own personal workflow, I don't usually use anything on that left-hand side palette, or that left-hand side tray, rather, excuse me. Now we have a right-hand side tray that by default is actually popped open like this, and of course we can expand and contract that as we want. Okay, so trays on either side. Now we also have what's known as our palette list. So all of my pull downs all the way across the top here, ZBrush calls these palettes, and this is all of my options. Everything from different brush types, settings for my brushes. The list goes on and on and on. All of these up here are known as my palettes. Now my palettes, while they can be accessible through these pull downs, they can actually also be docked into my trays. Okay, and I can do that by opening up any one of them. Okay, so let's say we constantly want to use this render palette here. Okay, and within this render palette, all I have to do is click right here, drag over, and let go, and I now have everything that was on this render pull down available to me over in this right hand side here. Okay, and we can expand or get rid of those as we need. Okay, we've got all of our brush settings right up here along the top. Okay, we can ignore this quick sketch, lightbox, and projection master. Okay, but the rest of this over here is going to be specifically for movement and my brushes. On this left-hand side here, a little bit over from the left tray, I've got my current brush I'm using. I've got my stroke. We'll go into this in a little bit more detail. I've got an alpha area, a texture, my material, and some color options as well as some gradients here. Okay. So one thing we need to be aware of right off the bat here is that this program was not originally created for 3D sculpting. It was originally created as a 2D, or also what's known as a 2.5D program. So you can see right in here, if I just click by default, we get some kind of weird things happening. Okay, so one of the first things that I needed to learn when I started doing this, because it's easy to make these little mistakes to start off, and create something like this, and it's like, okay, well, I actually don't want any of this. I just clicked once real quick. How do I get rid of this? How do I get a new scene in here? Because if I come down to file here, I don't really see anything that says new scene. Okay, and that's the sort of the default place I would look for this. Now, one thing that you're going to find with Zbrush is it's not set up the way that we would expect a 3D application to be set up. And this is a deterrent for many people, and it was for me for quite a long time. I just refused to use Zbrush because the interface was so goofy. But after a good amount of time now using Zbrush, I'm actually a big fan of it, and I think it makes a lot of sense. Okay, this was designed for an artist, not for someone who has experience in 3D applications like Maya or Max or whatever it may be. Okay, so how do I get to that new screen here? How do I get rid of this? Well, what I'm dealing with right now, because this isn't actually a 3D scene, it's 2D. I can't rotate what I'm looking at. Okay, this is just a little 2D screen here where I'm drawing in basically a bunch of boxes. So what I need to do is come to my document, and I can come down and create a new document. Go ahead and say no, and now I'm back with a new scene here. Okay, so let's get something in here that's going to allow us to edit it, so we can talk a little bit about some of these basics before we end off this first little lesson here. So I'm going to come over here, and one thing to be aware of is a lot of the sort of naming conventions, things that we're used to hearing, are a little bit different inside of Zbrush. So any 3D model that I may want to bring in to Zbrush, or any 3D model that I'm sculpting inside of Zbrush, is known as a tool. So over here we have our tool palette, okay, and this is going to be by default attached to this right hand side. So within this tool palette, this is where I can come in and load in an OBJ file. There is in fact some one-click interpolation between Maya and Zbrush. We'll look at that at a later time. Okay, but I could load in a tool, which is what Zbrush is going to call it. You'll see that it's going to be a .ztl file. So let's say we wanted to bring in one of these. These are the default file types that come with Zbrush here. So let's select this dog here, and let's just hit open. Okay, now nothing happens in my scene. Normally you would think, well, I just loaded in a tool. Why isn't it in my scene? Well, I actually have to draw it into my scene. You can see right here that I've got a little dog right there. It's my currently selected tool. And if I click and drag out here, I'm going to get dog. Now this looks like a 3D object. It really does. But it's not yet. We have to tell Zbrush when we want to work in 3D. Because right now, if I click again and drag, we draw out another one and another one. And this is what's known as this 2.5D. I'm technically dealing with a 2D scene here, but I've got sort of depth to it. Okay, that's that half D. Okay, so I can keep dragging all these in. I can just sort of fill my scene with all these cool looking little dogs. All right, let's create a new scene. Or let's clear out this document because it's getting kind of silly again. Okay, so when I drag this out for the first time, when I drag out my first tool, you have to tell Zbrush that you want to edit this, that you want to work on this as a 3D mesh. And you're going to do that right up here by either clicking the T button or clicking on Edit. Now once I click on this Edit button, all of a sudden I am now dealing with a 3D object. Okay, and I can now start to sculpt on it. Okay. Now once I've added in this tool, we're going to see a lot of things show up. Okay, I've now got a lot of these palettes, okay, showing up within here. So we've got our tool list right in here. We've got a subtool list, which is if I have multiple objects in my scene, they will become what's known as a subtool. So we need to wrap our heads around this idea of a tool. Okay, and as we can see, there's a lot going on in here. Now, the way I can navigate up and down this, you're going to see if I click on this, it's going to expand or contract. Okay, but as I expand that, now I can't see what's down here. So how do I scroll up and down? Well, in this little space right here in between this group of icons and the actual tools themselves, or the actual palettes themselves, got this little space, and I can just click and drag, and it's going to allow me to scroll up and down here, where I can come in, start to open things, move it around. Okay, and as I said, we can add anything we want to this, sort of after the fact. So we'll go ahead and expand or close all that stuff down. All right, so this is our general interface. Okay, now there's a lot more to this, and we're gonna take a look at all that. But for right now, as I said, I want to keep these quick. I want to keep them concise, anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes, so that you can get little snippets here and there. So I'm going to go ahead and end that off here today, and I will be back so shortly with another look here on our amazing ZBrush.